it was an interesting way and time to grow up trans, because I imprinted on a version of womanhood that was not about makeup or hairstyles or fashion, high heels, none of that, because I didn't learn it from movies. I didn't see it in the women I was around. To me, growing up, womanhood, what it meant to be a woman was just sort of this essential, innate thing, and it was reflected in how you were treated by people. A lot of it was cultural things, from the silly stuff of opening doors to pronouns and just the way you were treated. And I love the music I grew up with. That's my one takeaway from church was the music. I play fiddle, violin and lap harp and a lot of other instruments, and I play all those old songs. But being an inquisitive child, I'd like to think a little bit bright and with a lot of questions about the world, I thought the only way I could get out of that town, if not go to college, was to join the military. I took, as part of high school, you take the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, which is sort of like, it measures your potentiality for skills the military thinks are important. I did really well, and when I graduated, I wasn't going to school, so all the branches came courting. You may not believe it to look at me, but I was a rather delicate, soft child, not particularly rough, not particularly into fighting or exercising or weapons or anything like that, but I joined the U.S. Navy and I joined the hospital corps, which is sort of like a medic, and then I trained as a field medical combat specialist, because this was the time of the first Gulf War, which at that time was in Saudi Arabia. We were deposing Saddam Hussein, I think. They kept us in the dark about a lot of things, but for the first time I was out of that environment. I quickly rented VHSs and caught up on the movies. I bought embarrassing CDs and cassette tapes to catch up on all the music of my generation. And it was probably the first time in my life that I had to try to pass, quote unquote, a very politically loaded term, but at that time I was trying to pass as someone who fit into the culture, as someone who hadn't grown up in this strange cult. All my life I'd been trying to pass as someone who didn't have gender identity issues and who didn't have sexuality that, was not right for the time and place, according to some people. But the military taught me a lot of self-confidence. It ended up being a great thing for me, which it is not for everybody by any means. I'm not, a war booster or anything, but it taught me strength. It exposed me to the world. It taught me how to socialize a little bit, how to interact with people. And by my last year in the military, I had gone to Saudi Arabia with the Marines and, done the war, traveled the world. I lived for 2 years on an Alaskan island, 1,200 miles out in the Aleutian chain, and I met a pack of wilderness lesbians there. That's what they called themselves. And these women were mechanics who worked on the planes that would come into Adak Island. It was kind of a stopover point to refuel on one's way to Japan or Russia through the back door. And these women saw something in me. I wasn't really out to anyone as anything. I wasn't quite sure what I was. The internet was new at this time. We had limited access. All I knew is that I was very feminine, that I'd always secretly wished that I could be a girl, and that I happened to be attracted to men, which, when one is living male-bodied, was not a safe thing to have going on. But these women took me under their wings. We went out into the tundra and caught salmon during the salmon run and had campfires, and we would have secret meetings of like the gay and lesbian people on the island. It was a tiny, tiny island. And one time we went to Anchorage, Alaska, which was really long flight. We went to my first bar that served LGBT people, and I met my first, at that time, drag queen. And this was the first time I had ever really met in person anyone crossing gender boundaries in that way. And it really blew me away just to see that someone, who was male-bodied could cross gender boundaries like that and just go out in public, and everybody's like, hey, come on in. And it sort of opened a door in my mind. I finished my time in the military, went back home to Nashville, and immediately went and found another bar out in the gay ghetto. And I saw on stage performing my first transsexual women. And that further blew my mind. I knew it was what I had to do. I apprenticed myself to them, started doing shows because I'm a theatrical person. It was a perfect job for me to transition on, I suppose you would say. And, that started the new chapter of my life. I fully realize it's not everybody's story. A lot of people, especially nowadays, when so many more doors are open, so many more resources are out there, you don't have to transition in the gay ghetto. You don't have to, which I love the gay ghetto. I always have fun. But you don't have to be a showgirl. There's so many more options now. That worked for me at the time. 7 years in, my career had taken off. I was doing well, working full-time on stage, which I loved. I was transitioning medically, legally, socially, and a young man came to the bar from the nearby military base. We felt a spark, and we started dating. His name was Barry Winchell. He was heterosexually identified, had never dated anyone but women, and we considered our relationship to be a heterosexual relationship, a man and a woman together. Soon after we started dating, his fellow soldiers became jealous and angry. One particular was attracted to me and was attracted to him. Our relationship made him jealous, and he started spreading rumors. At that time in the U.S., the don't ask, don't tell policy made it literally a crime to be, gay or lesbian, much less trans, which they didn't even have language for in the military then, and barely do now. But it allowed an environment of extreme prejudice to boil against my boyfriend Barry at the time. It finally resulted in, on the 4th of July, which is America's Independence Day, and probably, our most patriotic holiday, while Barry was asleep taking care of the company mascot dog, I was in Nashville competing in a beauty pageant, the silly things we do when we're young. And they beat him to death in his sleep with a baseball bat, due to, I don't know what, due to inhumanity, really, and insanity, but, all from anti-gay sentiment, from homophobia. It didn't really matter that Barry was not gay. He didn't consider himself gay. We didn't consider our relationship gay. They killed him because they considered him gay, and they hated that and thought it deserved death.